Welcome and thank you for taking time to view this recorded webinar. The focus of our time together today will be to provide a brief overview of the employee safety and support portion of North Carolina's guidance on reopening K-12 public schools. My name is Jeremy Gibbs, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Eliz Colbert and Tom Tomberlin. You'll hear from both of them shortly. We serve as the leads for the NCDPI work group on employee safety and support. We are very appreciative of the time and expertise contributed by all of the members of our work group, consisting of practitioners in the field across our state, as well as staff at NCDPI. In response to the direction provided by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Public Instruction prepared a guidance document to help local schools and districts as they make plans for the 2020-2021 school year. The document is rather large and contains information on a variety of topics. In addition to various requirements in place from public health, the document also contains supporting information, considerations, recommendations, and other information that is not considered required, but is more offered to support schools and districts in decision-making processes locally. We will be showing you how to navigate both the summary document and the full document shortly. There are 3 operational plans required by the Department of Health and Human Services for the operation of schools in the coming year. Plan A, described as minimal social distancing, will be implemented if the COVID-19 metrics continue to stabilize or improve. All of the requirements noted throughout the document apply in this plan. Plan B, described as moderate social distancing, will be required if metrics worsen. There are additional requirements that you will note throughout the document that apply under Plan B, including limited density of facilities and increased rigor of social distancing practices. Plan C would be remote learning only, where school buildings would be closed to students and would mirror what we have seen in the past school year with the full school closures in place since March of 2020. So as you consider these operational plans, in today's webinar, we're going to take a look at the employee safety section of the full guidebook. The summary document serves as a jumping off point for accessing the specific section you may be looking for. By clicking on the strip of photos that you find on each section's page, you will be taken to that section within the full guidebook document. You may also navigate within the full document via the table of contents. Once you are in the employee safety section of the full guidebook, you will see several major topics addressed. I'll begin with a brief overview of the Monitoring for Symptoms section. Per our partners at the Department of Health and Human Services, each public school unit is required to have a process in place for monitoring for symptoms of COVID-19. Health and Human Services requirements are in place to enforce that staff stay home if they've tested positive or showing COVID-19 symptoms until they meet a criteria for return, or they've had recent close contact with a person with COVID-19. Additionally, schools and districts must conduct symptom screening of any person entering buildings, including staff. This also extends to boarding transportation, school transportation vehicles, school buses, and activity buses. In each section, we provide additional considerations for operationalizing on a local level, as well as further recommendations provided by the Department of Health and Human Services that while they may not be required, they should at least be considered by local schools and districts as they plan and prepare for the new school year. I'll turn it over to Dr. Colbert to continue with vulnerable populations.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about protecting vulnerable populations. And I am Liz Colbert from North Carolina Virtual, but I am a member of this team on employee safety and support. So the beginning of this section on protecting vulnerable populations starts with the same guidance from EEOC and the Americans with Disabilities Act for your reference. But in addition, we've added in a section from the CDC, a link entitled People Who Need to Take Extra Precautions. And this is information that, for those of you who are wondering exactly what does that mean, vulnerable populations. So the CDC outlines a few key members who would fall into that group, such as people with asthma or people with HIV or liver disease. People with dementia may require different accommodations, or people with disabilities, etc. So this document is here to guide you and to give you something to reflect on as you build your plan. So when thinking about vulnerable populations, DHHS requirement states that you need to create a process for staff to self-identify as high risk for severe illness due to COVID. So self-identify, and then have a plan in place to address the requests for alternative work arrangements and or reassignments. So for this section, Plan A and Plan B are merged because the rules and considerations are the same, whether we're in minimal social distancing or maximum social remote learning. Excuse me. So these are things to consider, to think about. These are not requirements, but to think about a process that provides clear guidelines for employees to notify supervisors, a process around whether or not you're going to require medical documentation. And if you choose any of these, please be sure to have uniform application for all employees of your public school unit. So you need guidelines around how long employees need to remain out, when it's safe to return, etc. Now, if you scroll farther down the document, you will see Plan B has some more intense considerations, one being a decision matrix for employees to decide who will be assigned to remote work and who will be assigned to face-to-face work if we are in a Plan B situation. So that's a critical piece. It is our recommendation that you try to make that decision matrix as public as possible. If we happen to be in remote learning in Plan C, we also know you will have employees that must report to the building. So be clear about your process around identifying who those people are and what the rules are. So once again, these are considerations for you as you build your plan. Then there are three that are merged across the whole document: establish and publish local leave and return to work policies. Publish these policies. So make these things obvious and apparent to your employees. You will notice farther down in Plan B, there are some things to consider around questionnaires to determine which employees will be assigned to on-site work and who will be assigned to remote work. These are all tools and opportunities for you to build a plan that makes sense for your school district and your employees. And please note, depending on the level of decision-making that you are doing, you need to involve your local board attorney at all the appropriate steps to make sure you're staying in compliance with laws and policies. So the next section I'm going to touch on briefly is employee coping and resilience. It's important to note that the stress and anxiety around all of this, around the virus, around remote learning, around blended learning, it impacts employees in different ways. As you know, some of your employees will be fine and flexible and agile, while others will have severe anxiety or stress over all these changes and all these what ifs. So please, it is recommended that you develop a plan to ensure that employees have access to mental health, mental wellness services. and it is recommended that you conduct ongoing training as information becomes available about cases in your area or new strategies for cleaning schools or desks, etc., that you continue to provide ongoing training to keep your employees as informed as possible. And then once again, there are some considerations for operationalizing this information for you to think about and reflect on. So know the recommendations and use the considerations to build a plan that makes sense for your community. So now I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Tom Tomberlin to talk about hiring considerations for the summer and fall.
Thank you, Liz. This is Tom Tomberlin, Director of Educator Recruitment and Support for NCDPI. As employers consider reopening for the 2021 school year, hiring new employees will be part of that process. And so the state has issued some guidance around hiring processes as well as return to work for your existing employees. So as in other sections, we've highlighted the EEOC's guidance around hiring. And you can click on those links and this will take you to their webpage where they give you some guidelines around what is acceptable questions to ask a new hire and what are not acceptable. And so many health-related questions, general health-related questions you can ask as a condition of pre-service. And so we would recommend that you take some time to review these documents. There's actually two documents, separate documents in this, that you take some time to review this with your board attorney to make sure that you have a compliant pre-screening process in place for your new hires. And that's the other document. A lot of this is general pandemic response, but there are COVID-19 specific related issues woven into this document. One thing that's really good is this one right here, your ADA compliant pre-pandemic employee survey. So if you're going to survey your current employees about their ability to return to work, this is a good vetted survey that you could send out without violating anyone's privacy. So then we also have some recommendations for how you can operationalize this. Some of those things are encouraging virtual interviewing processes. If you are going to do face-to-face, then we would recommend that you refer back to the DHHS guidelines for social distancing and protection for those folks involved. Also, when you're working with your employees around issues related to their personal health, it would be advisable for employers to develop some kind of secure file transfer protocol so that employees can securely transmit medical documentation to you. Please remember that email is not a secure form of document transfer. And so you don't want employees emailing you their medical records. You want to provide a secure process for them to do that. It is also advisable for you to revisit whatever your plan is, to revisit that with employees prior to the opening of school to make sure everybody's and develop a orientation process for all employees before starting the new school year, which includes all your safety and health guidelines for the new school year. And here's some considerations for operationalizing that. As districts move into this new school year, employee leave will become a consideration. And so we want to be very clear that the North Carolina Schools Benefits and Employment Policy Manual governs the use of leave for all school employees. So here's a link to that document. This is the most recent page, but in this guidance document, we have pulled out those parts that are relevant to employees in relation to COVID-19. So our recommendation from NCDPI is that to preserve the leave balances of your employees wherever possible, to utilize the Families First Corona Response Act, the FFCRA, which is the federal leave. Here is a link to that, the guidance around that. This provides paid sick leave for employees due to coronavirus related issues with childcare. Under this provision, the employees can earn up to 2/3 of their regular pay while they're out on the federal, the FFCRA. Of course, locally, you have the option to allow leave to be used to bring that employee up to full salary. So they could use 1/3 of a day of sick leave to supplement that. You should be very clear with your employees how that will work and how you will manage it. One thing we do recommend or ask you to consider is that in some cases your employees may need to use annual leave in lieu of sick leave if they've exhausted all their sick leave. It is allowable under state board policy to use annual leave in lieu of sick leave. However, annual leave can only be used in half-day increments. We would hope you would consider if you're using that annual leave to allow them to use it in the hourly increments as prescribed for sick leave. That way your employees won't have to waste part of their day. If a half day is being used to cover a third day, then they won't lose that excess. The rest of the sick leave, the different leave policies are outlined here, and some guidance around them, as well as the sections in which they can be found in the overall document. One thing that we really need to point out here is the contagious disease policy, section 9.4.1. That is the existing, that was the existing policy prior to COVID-19. That policy is still in effect. However, employers should be aware that this can only be triggered by an official declaration by the director of the county health department. So if the county health department orders one of your employees to quarantine or self-isolate, then that employee receives full pay for the duration of the self-isolation or quarantine by the county health department. Public schools should be aware that they cannot instigate this leave on their own. This has to be done in conjunction with the county health department. So we would recommend that PSUs have close contact with your health department during this school year, so that if there are employees that need to be quarantined or isolated, that the county health department is making that determination. Then section 9.2 is the emergency leave policy related specifically to COVID-19. We want you to be aware that that policy ends June 15th, 2020. There is no emergency leave for employees at this time moving into the 2021 school year. So that you need to make your employees who may have been using that leave in the March closure, make them aware that this is no longer an option and that any leave would either be in one of the sections listed above this. We will note below that this leave guidance is based on current State Board of Education policy. There have been no policy changes to the manual in relation to COVID-19 for the 2021 school year. We will monitor the conditions of the pandemic as we move forward in the 2021 school year. And if the board needs to make some policy revisions, we will alert the field that those have occurred. But as of right now, everything is according to the policies as stated in the current manual. So we hope you find this guide useful. But we fully anticipate that many districts and charter schools will encounter situations that are not specifically covered in this guidance. For those situations where you have health questions, DHHS has provided a Strong Schools North Carolina toolkit And that can be accessed by clicking on the picture of that document, and that will take you to the DHH's website, and there you can access that toolkit. You can review that guidance for your question. There is a wealth of information in there, and many of your scenarios should be covered in that document. However, if you still have a question that you don't have an answer to, DHHS has provided a email address where you can email your questions, public health questions, to them and to get a response. Additionally, you may have questions related to State Board of Education policy or just education and academics in general. For those questions, you can access the full guidebook, Lighting Our Way Forward. Many of these scenarios will be covered in that document, that much larger document, and it's all laid out by topic with links to those different sections that you just have to click on, and it'll take you to those sections. If, however, you still have a question that needs to be answered, you can use this website here to type in your question, and the communications department will forward your question on to the appropriate subject matter expert here in the department. So you don't have to guess of who you have to contact. You just write your question and we'll get it to the right person and get your response to your question. So we hope you find this section helpful as you plan your new school year. We hope you all have a very safe and issue-free start to the 2021 school year. And please know that we're here to assist in any way should you need our help. Thank you.